I think it is 7:30 and we have 31 people registered to be on, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Tom will let people jump in as they can. And I just want to thank you for coming this morning and giving us a federal update. We also have John Kirchner from the U.S. Chamber with us. So after Tom speaks and you have that opportunity to ask him questions, we'll bring John on for an update on all the policy movement that's going on right now that the U.S. Chamber is most involved with. And you'll have an opportunity to ask John questions as well or make comments. I know last week we had a session with Tom with another group I'm involved with. We talked a lot about workforce. That's on everyone's mind right now, and we're doing things to get a better handle on exactly where we're at and why things are happening. Most of you got the labor shortage survey, and those results will actually be presented at our wrap up next week on May 26th. That will also be by Zoom because our legislators, our state legislators requested it due to the fact that they're going to be called into a special session. They just didn't know exactly when that would be, and Zoom worked better for them. So make sure you get registered for that May 26th Zoom meeting with our with our state legislators. And then we will be back in person on June 16th here at the Chamber office. We're not sure what the program will be. We're going to decide that once we see what the final outcome of the legislation is that we have coming forward after the session wraps up. And yeah, we're looking forward to having everybody back in person. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our congressman. And I kind of told him we want a little bit of everything. What kind of policy stuff he's working on? What are the partisan politics looking like in DC? And how are things going? What does he see happening into the summer months? So Tom, thank you for joining us this morning. And if people have questions, please put them over in chat. I know he watches that chat pretty closely, and we'll try to get your questions answered as we move along too. So. Congressman, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you for everything you've done for the chamber, and frankly for the St. Cloud surrounding areas. First off, he watches that chat closely. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, Teresa, but I'm the guy who was upside down in my hearing. I couldn't get my, my head was upside down, and oh well. Listen, I'm technologically evolving. Well, let's start with this. Last week was Law Enforcement Week. I want to give a shout out like I did last week, Teresa, to Blair Anderson and his officers and Mayor Kleiss. I'm telling you, what they have established up in St. Cloud is it should be the model for the rest of the state, if not the nation. They handled that hostage situation about as well as you could. So well that they really didn't make much news. Obviously, our wonderful media would prefer to have negative outcomes. That's what they want to report. The Cop House legislation. You guys know that you're the poster child for some of the police reform that we're trying to push here in Washington, D.C. We're going to keep doing that. May is Mental Health Month, which is great because, it was just a little bit more than a year ago we went into a pandemic, and I don't know about the rest of you, but I've been nuts ever since. And I'm not trying to make light of mental health issues, but we've all got them after being locked up in our houses and having to deal with our businesses. Pretty important stuff. We're hosting a town hall tonight, in fact, focused on mental health issues. So if any of you are out there, you're interested, let me know. Richard Lee, the executive director of the Central Minnesota Mental Health Center, and Vonnie Hovland, the St. Cloud VA's recovery coordinator, are going to join us on that. If you are interested, you can find more information at emmer.house.gov. Listen, when it comes to transportation, it's in the news. There are some issues. The Democrats here in Congress, primarily Bernie Sanders and Ocasio-Cortez from New York, they want to define infrastructure as something well beyond what we know infrastructure to be. The Biden administration made a $2.4 trillion proposal that less than 6% went to roads and bridges. There was more in there for subsidizing electric cars than there was for traditional infrastructure. That's got to be addressed. Uh, it sounds like I was talking to Chris Manival. If you haven't met him, you should. He's my chief of staff, does a fabulous job. Chris and I were talking this morning about the fact that the House is putting out roughly a $500 million proposal. The Senate, they're a very interesting bunch, the Republicans. They proposed 600, but said they'd go to 800 billion. And I think Lindsey Graham yesterday said maybe even 900. I mean, what a way to negotiate. We'll see where that goes. It was great last week to see St. Cloud get 5.8 million for the airport out of the Federal Department of Transportation funding for reconstruction of taxiways. So it's great. Let's talk about taxes and COVID relief. The president continues to press on with his idea of increasing taxes. He claims that it will only be on people earning 400,000 or more. That is not accurate. You want to see the hidden taxes. Inflation is stealing from everyone. Your retirement accounts, this inflation that we saw just last month is not slowing down. And it's not a good recipe for success. Incurring more debt. I don't know if you saw that the Treasury announced yesterday that they're expanding the child tax credit. It'll kick in on July 15th, and there are approximately 39 million American households with kids who will start to receive monthly payments of as much as $300 per child under 6 and up to $250 per child over 6. So the program is it's set for a year. The supplement that Teresa talked about when we started to unemployment, it runs out in September, but between now and then, it really incentivizes our workforce to stay at home. In fact, 42% of people receiving these benefits earn more right now than they did when they were working. By the way, 20 states are cutting their federal unemployment supplements beginning in June. It's probably something Minnesota should be considering. Keep in mind, there are 9 million Americans are still unemployed, and the average earnings for private sector employees rose by 21 cents to $30.17 an hour in April. So companies are struggling to hire, and that's what they're paying on average. In March, job openings hit a record 8.1 million. It's pretty crazy. And Teresa, I'll finish with this, turn over what you want to talk about. The partisanship is not going away. I think the president is figuring out if he wants to get something done other than through reconciliation, he's going to need Republicans. He's starting to talk like he wants to talk. But Nancy Pelosi, I asked one of the more senior folks last night, what about Nancy? She doesn't seem to be interested in talking with anybody. And even if Sam Graves, our ranking member on transportation, Peter DeFazio, the chairman out of Oregon, even if they put out this $400 to $500 billion infrastructure bill, I think John Kirchner will tell you later, the problem that we're all worried about here in Washington is that Nancy Pelosi will snatch that bill, load it up with all kinds of Green New Deal stuff that Ocasio-Cortez is demanding because she can't get it across the floor without it. And then guess what? We're probably left with reconciliation, but we'll see. We'll see. All right, Teresa.
Tom, one of the things I get asked often is about when we can resume our trips to Washington, D.C., because we've missed now for 2 years. It's something our volunteers really look forward to, as well as the work that we get done out there, I think can't be replicated any other way. So I put in the chat, if we do plan a trip to DC, what will our experience be? And are there restrictions as to how many people we can have in your office or in other offices, or other restrictions in place for getting in the buildings?
There are no restrictions in my office, none. But I will tell you, if you can start planning in June. Chris, what is it? June 11th, it all comes off?
I'd have to double check. I can work with Teresa.
Yeah, we can. So Bowser, the mayor, is taking off DC restrictions, I think, effective either June 1st or June 11th. I can't remember which right now. Chris will check and let you know. But if you want to be safe, I'd say September, because the other person that controls the Hill, the only person that controls the Hill, is Nancy Pelosi. She's the one that decides what the security looks like. She makes every decision on the Hill, not the mayor. So right now, the office buildings are not open, I don't believe, for visitors.
We're allowed to have up to 6.
We're allowed to have up to 6 visitors.
So we gotta do wrestling.
And we gotta have escort. It's just so outrageous. I mean, the Senate, the old men and women over on the other side of the building don't wear masks, and on our side of the building, you got to wear masks. I don't know. Teresa, I'm going to stand by it. If you want to take a chance, June is supposed to open up, but I would say September.
Okay, great. I know the Minnesota Chamber's planning, I think October, so we might just decide to go with them this year and then plan a spring trip. That might be the safest way to do it.
It might be, but oh, look out for the variants. Look out for the variants. We could be in trouble. There are variants out there. You know, the best thing to do, Teresa, I've heard the Virginia Department of Health running ads as I go out for my walk, that you should triple mask and stay 6 feet apart, and make sure, in the words of Tim Walz, wash your hands. Wash your hands. I didn't know it had an R in it. I'm picking on Tim. I'm sorry.
That's the Southern way of saying it. That's the way they say it in Missouri.
I know.
So let's go back to the federal kicker, that $300 of federal unemployment that gets tacked on. Are there stipulations around what the states, if they take that money back, what they can do with it? I know some are filling their unemployment coffers back up, which Minnesota's definitely needs filling. And do you have any sense through the state government about what the appetite is for doing something like that?
So I had this conversation with Steve Grove and Tim Walz back in late April, early May last year, a year ago. I suggested, because they don't seem to understand, you know, the governor said to us in a call that, you know, Minnesota sits great because our unemployment insurance can carry us through last October, right? I don't think he understands that it's employers that actually fill that pot of money, and that how it's supposed to be used. He thinks it's just play money. I suggested back then that you should take the federal supplement and offset it against your responsibilities, so that you're actually giving a benefit to the employers and the employees by making sure that you know, you bring the rates down. Actually, you keep filling the pot of money up with the federal, and you don't do the supplements so people go back to work. They clearly were not interested then, Teresa, and they're not interested now. You know, it's sad, but you know, I'm going to be very partisan with this comment, but the Democrat-led states in this country are not doing well. Minnesota is one of them. The leadership is just not there. And you know, if some of you on this call disagree with me, that's your right. But whether it's downtown Minneapolis, which is completely out to lunch. I don't know what they're going to do when that thing collapses. You know, when Target doesn't renew 2/3 of its office space, you're not rebuilding because people aren't coming down to Minneapolis. They don't feel safe. I don't know what they're thinking, but it's the same thing at the state level. The governor needs to be right more than he's willing to listen, and that's been a problem, Teresa. By the way, I told that group last week, this is not just Minnesota. That supplement is causing problems all across the country. It's the #1 issue. People cannot hire.
Well, and there aren't people to hire. That's hopefully too, we're going to find out in that survey that we're doing, Tom, exactly, or at least more about the impacts of that $300, the real impacts of it.
When are you done with that, by the way? I remember you
said it'll be presented next Wednesday, so a week from today. We're presenting it at the legislative wrap up to our state legislators at that point, and it'll be in the press, and we'll get you a copy of it too, so you have it. I'm anxious to see what it says. So
By the way, I think I was just corrected by somebody, and if I'm wrong, that's very fair. But they said Target's not renewing less than 1/3 of their space in downtown Minneapolis.
I also heard that, and
Yeah,
that
okay, if I'm wrong about that, so be it. But it still is the same statement. You're losing all kinds of business in downtown Minneapolis, and if people say if they don't think that, they should just well, they might want to check it out. It's going to collapse if they don't figure out how to keep people safe in Minneapolis.
Wait
Um,
a minute.
there are some questions over in.
Sorry, excuse me.
I'm sorry, Mark, go ahead.
I just need to clarify something. Is downtown Minneapolis dealing with a safety issue or dealing with a coronavirus issue or multiple issues?
Multiple issues.
Thank you very much. That was really unfair of you.
Mark, I said you could disagree with me, but it is when you're defunding the police, when you're losing all these police officers, and you're not enforcing the rule of law, people do not feel safe going to Minneapolis. I hear that on a regular basis.
I'm not sure that's the only reason that people are not going to downtown Minneapolis.
I agree with that, which is what I said.
Karen said, can you please speak to where you think the $15 minimum wage discussion will go in the coming year?
You know, there doesn't seem to be an appetite for it in the Senate by Democrats. You know, people talk about Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema as being the two that speak out most when it comes to tax increases, when it comes to these other issues. But there's, I think there were half a dozen more, Chris, that voted against the minimum wage when it was up the first time. In the Senate, yeah. So I just don't see it moving because it's not going to get through the Senate. They have the votes in the House. They can move it out of the House, but it does not look like it can get through the Senate. So I don't expect it to be on any freestanding legislation. It is possible. It is possible. I believe they can stick that in a reconciliation bill.
I think ruled it wasn't germane
Oh.
last time.
Never mind. Chris is telling me the parliamentarian ruled that it wasn't germane on the first reconciliation bill. I'd forgotten that. So I don't see it going at the federal level, but people are involved and things can change once we get to October to December. If we don't get something done between now and October, there will be another reconciliation bill for sure before the end of the year. And, you know, when people are involved, things get moving. You never know what they might stick into some kind of vehicle. Right now, though, I don't see that moving at the federal level before the end of the year.
Other questions? What kind of policy issues are you working on, Tom? What's at the top? You talked about the infrastructure bill. Are there other things happening?
No, we've obviously, one of the main focuses we've had in our office, it's financial services issues. We want to make sure that you are, look, it's about Main Street, making sure, one, that PPP, if people have forgiveness issues that they still have to go through, our office is processing a ton of those, Teresa. If anybody's out there and you have issues, it doesn't matter. We represent everyone. So if you've got an issue with, you know, loan forgiveness, if you have other issues that have to do with those programs that were passed under the initial CARES Act, under the $900 billion CARES 2 that was done before the end of the year, or under the $1.9 trillion bill that was done at the beginning of this year, please let us know. Policy issues, it's capital formation issues for small business primarily. Those are the ones that are really struggling through this pandemic. But we don't limit it to that. It just seems to be that's the focus. Then, you know, mental health and addiction issues. We're still working with Senator Klobuchar on the Abby Honnold Act. We're working, which is, by the way, trauma-informed training for our police officers when you deal with, you know, significant traumas. And this one's primarily focused on sexual assaults. Our officers need to be trained in a very specific manner so that they can preserve the evidence and they can actually prosecute these animals. We've been working on that the last couple of Congresses. I'm not sure if we don't get freestanding bills, we've got to figure out a way to start working together so that we can get some other stuff through. And then mental health and addiction issues, Teresa, have been a focus of ours. And there's other stuff. I mean, we're working on transportation issues all the time. We're working on ag issues. These are two of the main things that not only our district, but I think our state is concerned with. So that's the kind of stuff that we focus on.
Jim Knobloch typed in a question of what are you hearing about the chances for Biden's proposed capital gains tax increases, elimination of 1031 real estate exchanges and step up basis?
It's real. It's real. They're not backing off. I mean, so our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, the more traditional Democrats who would fit my grandfather, they're not in favor of that stuff. But you know, the new breed, the new you know, more ideological folks, you know, Ocasio-Cortez, Bernie, that group, they absolutely want to eliminate stepped up basis. By the way, you know, it's not partisan. The folks that have drafted this, they came in with the Biden administration with one thing in mind. Everything that the last administration did was wrong, and they want to undo that stuff. And I think they found out now as they came in and the executive orders that they did on inauguration day. You know, you've seen the result after 3 months plus. Gas prices are now on average higher than they've been since 2014. You know, you're losing the energy independence. The border is really in crisis. They've got some issues, and perhaps after last month's jobs report and the inflation issue, I was told last night that they're starting to look at this because they were, I think the guy who was speaking last night, an economist, his term was they were gobsmacked that this thing backfired on them in the first 3 months. So they're starting to look at maybe what they do to bring it under control going forward. That being said, Jim, look, if we don't find a way to work together in the next few months, big test is going to come up in the next few weeks with this infrastructure bill. If we can find a way to work together on that, you and I should be hopeful for the rest of the year. If we don't find a way to work together on that, then it's going to come down to another reconciliation bill. And reconciliation is a tool that's used after the budget expires on September 30th at midnight. They'll have another opportunity to do a reconciliation bill before the end of the year. It takes a simple majority in the Senate, which they have. A reconciliation bill can only deal with revenue and expense. It can't create new programs. So, you know, can they make DC a state, or can they pack the court with reconciliation? No, but they can do taxes. They can eliminate tax cuts. They can create new taxes. That's where it would happen if it happens. And I think we have to stay vigilant.
Great. Chris has a question. Chris Chapman.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Emmer, for joining us this morning. I appreciate it. I have a question about the businesses that were destroyed, you know, during the unrest that we experienced, and are they being replaced by federal dollars? Are they going to be replaced? Is the state going to be responsible? Is the taxpayers going to be responsible? And what is being done about making Minneapolis safe? Is if there is anything. I wouldn't bring my family down to Hennepin and walk down Hennepin Avenue. I wouldn't do it. And it sounds like a lot of businesses and business owners that I've talked to down there, they don't want to reopen. I think Britt's Pub, the last time I heard, they didn't want to reopen. They've been down there it's kind of been a staple for a long time. But just wondering what your thoughts are, if there's anything happening, whether it be reform that they can all agree upon, you know, in Minneapolis, or what's going on as far as making people safe. Because COVID is eventually going away. I mean, if it hasn't already. So,
you know, they've got some real challenges. I think the police department, I think the chief is trying to do the right things, but he's, you know, this is from an outsider, because Mark's right. There's a whole bunch of things going on in downtown Minneapolis that go beyond this, but it really is a matter of leadership, and you've got to make it clear we're going to have safety and security, right? Your business is going to be safe, your property is going to be safe, and right now there's questions about that, and they're working through it. I'm not going to speak for what the Minneapolis City Council or the mayor are trying to accomplish. From my standpoint, when it comes to police reform at the federal level, the problem you're having, Chris, is they want to eliminate something called qualified immunity. The problem is if you eliminate qualified immunity, you eliminate the police. You literally, so qualified immunity simply says when officers are faced with life and death split-second decisions, if any other officer would have done the same or similar thing, then there should be no liability on that officer because we want them to act even if they make mistakes. Look, I think the cop house in St. Cloud is a great reform. I think Tim Scott has put forward some really good stuff in the Senate. If they can reach agreement on that, that might help the state people get their stuff done. When it comes to rebuilding, you know, there's a couple of things going on. The state has put money out there. They asked for FEMA dollars, 15 million. Which I thought was interesting since they were looking to rebuild the third precinct that, quite frankly, never should have burned to the ground in the first place. They basically made a decision in the morning to abandon it, which, well, look, hindsight's 2020, but I think we saw what happened after that. You had problems in Dallas and New York, and it just spread across the country. But I asked them, I asked FEMA before they issued the 15 million to at least do an investigation as to why this happened so that we had a report, make sure it never happens again. But before they could even do that, they determined that it wasn't a FEMA issue. And people should know, I think it was the Maryland issue, the Missouri issue, both of those under Obama were denied FEMA dollars, and the one in LA back in the 90s, that was the only one that got FEMA relief. So I don't know that this administration has revisited whether or not federal relief is going to be provided, but I do know that the state legislature, Chris, has appropriated some dollars to try and help rebuild those lost businesses in Minneapolis.
Thank you.
Before we let you go, Tom, Kevin Johnson asked if you could share your opinion on the concerns we're hearing about inflation.
You know, it's real. And by the way, I used to talk about this before I went to Congress. They talk about core inflation, and you know, the accountants all have their ways of talking about it, but it was significant in April. And forget what the economists are saying. You and I, we go into the stores, we see it, we feel it. I think that's more important, is that people do feel it. It's not just fuel, it's food. I mean, have you tried to buy a 4x8 sheet of plywood lately? I think I told you last week, Teresa, somebody sent me a meme that said, hey, I've got a 4x8 sheet of plywood to trade for a 2017, 2018 Corvette. I want it loaded, low miles. Listen, I know what I've got. This 4x8 sheet of plywood is worth a lot of money. So I think, you know, the debt issue is, this is what the discussion was last night, Teresa. You know, the spending without a plan. And let's face it, the last administration was doing it too. Maybe not at this level. And I understand CARES was an unprecedented time, but it's one of the reasons I voted against the budget back in July of 2019. We got to figure out what we're doing with this. This is the risk, right? And the Fed has kind of got its hands tied, because if it starts tightening, then you go into a recession, right? So they're walking a very, very fine line right now, and I think that's gonna have an impact going forward. It's I think the monetary policy, we've got to do some different things. But now that you're out there, you're literally on the end of the diving board. If you draw it back, the result could be either way. You're going to have inflation, and or you draw it back, you're going to have a recession. This is going to be a very, very interesting threading of the needle over the next few months.
Great. Well, it's 8 o'clock, and I know Mark also posted in chat some views regarding the pricing of oil that you'll want to check out there. I want to thank you for coming on with us this morning and for being available, Tom, and hopefully we're going to get out there in the coming months to visit you in your office again.
Yeah, no, I look forward to it. I look forward to it. I hope you all stay healthy. I'm glad that we're starting to come out of it, and let's get back to living.
And if you get back here this summer, we're happy to host you here too. So just let me know when you're coming.
I'll be back.
We'd love to see you. Okay.
I look forward to it.
Thank
Take care, guys.
We have additionally this morning with us John Kirchner, who is our representative in Minneapolis for the U.S. Chamber. And I know that they've been working on a lot of efforts in a lot of different areas. And I asked him just to give us a brief update on some of the policy things that they're working on. John, you know several of these people. We look forward to welcoming you up here as well. I know you said you're not traveling anywhere yet, but hopefully that'll be coming about soon.
Yes, thanks, Teresa. Thanks for having me. I was glad, like I said earlier, I was glad to see you're doing this virtually because we're not allowed to travel yet. So it's the only way I can stay engaged and get out there from my office. So glad to be here, glad to be with you all. I'll provide a quick federal policy update. Obviously, Congressman Emmer talked about a number of things. I'll talk about a few of them again and maybe some new things, and then I'll take your questions. But real quickly, if we just look back here towards the end of last year, kind of hopefully the last of the COVID pandemic types of legislation, the American Rescue Plan came out. That was an additional $1.9 trillion in spending. Very little of it went to business, but some elements did. There was additional unemployment support in terms of checks being sent out to families. And as we've talked about, the additional $300 per week in enhanced unemployment benefits that we have come out against and said that needs to be canceled and gotten rid of. As we talk to our members, the number one issue they have right now is workforce, and the workforce issue being we can't get them to come back to work because they're making more, and the congressman mentioned it, for over 40% of people right now on unemployment are making more on unemployment than they would working. So we're incentivizing them to stay home, which is causing a problem for our recovery as you look at the jobs numbers that came out last month. There was an additional $50 billion in small business support. The Paycheck Protection Program was part of that. That money is now gone. The PPP program is largely over, and we're now kind of in the forgiveness and repayment phases. There was some additional money for shuttered venues, restaurant revitalization program, things of that nature that businesses can avail themselves to. As we kind of look forward now into what kind of our post-COVID world looks like, what are we really working on? One of the top priorities for the business community, for the chamber, is infrastructure. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about that. Congressman Emmer talked about it. Our views on infrastructure is that we need to fund it via a user fee. We've talked about the gas tax in the past. We feel that right now is the best way. We're certainly open to other ideas, but we feel that a user fee that is dedicated to funding infrastructure is important. We haven't raised the gas tax since 1993, so we're trying to build a 21st century infrastructure on $1993, and it's not happening. So we need to find a way to pay for it. We think it needs to be a user fee. If there are other ways of paying for it, we're open to discussing that, but it should not be on the backs of American companies and jobs creators right now, which is where the Biden administration has been focusing. Similarly, we want to prioritize traditional infrastructure, roads, bridges, broadband, ports, water systems, right? What we consider traditional infrastructure, not all of this other stuff that we'll be talking about shortly. And we need to streamline the permitting process. Right now, if we agreed on what infrastructure is and we found a way to pay for it, the permitting process is still too long right now. We need to streamline that so that when we agree what it is and we can pay for it, we can get going and get the shovels in the ground and get building this rather than have to go through 4, 5, 6 different federal agencies to get it done. The Biden administration has their Build Back Better plan, which is about $4 trillion in infrastructure. But in this case, there are two pieces to it. There's the American Jobs Plan, which is kind of what would be considered probably more traditional infrastructure in a lot of ways. And then there's the American Families Plan. We just spent I talked about $1.9 trillion at the end of last year for the pandemic relief. We spent another couple $2 trillion last year, another $4 trillion. We're talking about a lot of money here. And we want to talk about why there's inflation. Pumping all this money in to the economy and just printing money and sending it in is creating a problem. And so we're very much want to focus on the infrastructure side on this, and want to make sure that we are not taxing businesses as a part of this. So as we look at kind of the tax hikes that the Biden administration is talking about, they're talking about raising the corporate tax rate to 28%. They're talking about energy related taxes. They're talking about a lot of different international taxes, the book minimum tax. There's a lot of different taxes they're talking about and paying for this. And we've had, more than, I think, 60 meetings with members of Congress, a lot of Democrats on this issue, on the House side in particular. And as the congressman said, there's a lot of Democrats who are not in favor of this, but we need to make sure that we can get them all on the same page, or as many as we can, to stop these tax increases from happening. And some of them are saying, well, maybe let's just go to 25% instead of 21. Well, when you start putting state taxes on top of that, Minnesota's not a low state tax, that our tax rate's going to be higher than that of China. We're talking about trying to be competitive with China, and globally, having a higher tax rate than China is not making us competitive. But in addition to that, what's in the, so that was kind of the jobs plan, which is kind of traditional infrastructure. The other side of that is the American Families Plan, which is about another $1.8 trillion of that $4 trillion. And in there is $109 billion for free community college, $200 billion for universal pre-K, $4 billion in teacher support, $225 billion in paid family medical leave, $225 billion in childcare. I mean, there's a lot of billions in there, right? That they're trying to jam into this infrastructure plan. And we're saying, let's separate it. Let's focus on traditional infrastructure and get that done. And then we can have this other conversation about what's in the American Families Plan. And the question is, how are they going to pay for that? Marginal rate increase on taxes? Is there going to be a capital gains increases on taxes? As Mr. Knobloch asked earlier, are we going to be talking about stepped up basis? How are we going to pay for all this, right? So the answer is they're going to raise taxes. And so we want to make sure that we can push back on that as hardly as firmly as we can on some of those tax increases. And other proposed taxes that, and I'm saying the word taxes a lot here, but other ones that have been talked about on the campaign trail and other elements are, Social Security tax, payroll taxes, 28% cap on itemized deductions, more estate taxes, wealth taxes, financial transaction taxes, carbon taxes. They're kind of looking at every possible way they can to raise money to pay for a lot of these programs. And a lot of that is going to be on the back of the businesses. And, it's not just big businesses. There's over 2 million small businesses in the United States that could be affected by just by raising the corporate tax rate, right? And so this isn't a corporate tax. This is going to be a tax on every business out there. Most Americans out there are going to see it one way or another, and we need to make sure that we're pushing hard against that. A couple other quick issues. We continue to push for immigration reform. Certainly, as we have these workforce issues, immigration reform is important to get the businesses the workers they need, both high skilled and low skilled. So we want to keep finding good, strong legal ways to increase our immigration to get the businesses the workers they need. And one of our last big issues that came up and has left but is not going away is the PRO Act. And if you guys remember Card Check from several years ago, the very pro-union bill, anti-business bill called Card Check, the PRO Act is just a more ridiculous version of Card Check. It's going to enforce employers to turn over private information about their workers to the unions, names, addresses, phone numbers, email address, shift schedules, work locations. It repeal right to work laws in 27 states. Now, Minnesota is not a right to work state, but it will repeal right to work laws in 27 states. Employers would lose a lot of their standing in cases before the NLRB. It's going to hinder the ability to work as an independent contractor, which a lot of our businesses, particularly small businesses, rely on independent contractors. And if you are a business right now that has a union, and if you're a worker and you don't like the union, the job that they're doing, it's going to prevent workers from decertifying a union as well, even if they're unhappy with it. So this isn't going away. The House already passed it. It didn't pass in the Senate because of the filibuster, which we'll talk about here briefly. But this is another anti-business, pro-union piece of legislation that, if we thought card check was bad, this is dramatically worse than that. And so in addition to battling all these taxes and everything else that I talked about, we're opposing the PRO Act very strenuously. And the last thing I'll talk about as it relates to the PRO Act, but a lot of these taxes and other elements are the filibuster. There's a lot of talk in Washington right now about repealing the filibuster because the Senate's very inefficient, is not able to get things done. We oppose that, and it doesn't matter that Republicans are in charge or Democrats are in charge. We oppose repealing the filibuster. One, because if you repeal it, what you're going to do is you're going to get a lot of unstable public policy that's going to be purely partisan legislation. And when a new administration and party takes control, they're going to roll a lot of that back. And we feel that that's not a good way to legislate, by passing a bunch of partisan things, have the new administration come in, and then make them go away and pass partisan issues on the other way. That sometimes the inefficiency of the Senate does work, and there is a purpose to that. But we also feel that getting rid of the filibuster is going to further divide the Senate on partisanship. And you are now going to eliminate any incentive there is to work across the aisle, Republicans and Democrats. And frankly, the other issue is reforming is only going to make the Senate less efficient. So right now they're talking, well, let's not get rid of the filibuster. Let's just kind of go back to the Mr. Smith goes to Washington and say, how do we, let's go back to the talking filibuster, right? That makes it less efficient, because what happens now is if you're going to filibuster something, you just raise your hand and say, we're going to filibuster this. And they say, okay, we'll move on to the next piece of legislation. If you don't do that and you go back to the talking filibuster, then the Senate can conduct no business while the filibuster is going on. And so you look at nominations of judges or cabinet appointees, whatever it might be, any business in the Senate now is halted because of the filibuster you're talking. So it's going to make it less efficient. So, we feel that rather than repealing the filibuster, we need to stress more bipartisanship. We need to find ways for Republicans and Democrats to work together on these important issues, whether it's immigration or reform, infrastructure, whatever it might be. But we feel that there is a better way to do this. Rather than making Congress more partisan, we need to make it more bipartisan, and we feel that's the best route of doing that. So that was fast, that was quick. I went through a lot, but I want to, make sure to respect everybody's time, and I'm certainly open to any questions, comments, whatever there might be. I see Mark. Does the U.S. Chamber have statistics about the amount of employers that paid the federal minimum wage and the average pay wages among employers? I can certainly look into that. I don't have that readily available, but I'm certain we have access to some data that would tell us who's paying the federal minimum wage and what that average wage is. And the minimum wage is a tough issue, and we talked about it earlier, because what's happening in Stearns County is very different than what's happening even in Hennepin County, right? Or what's happening, in different parts of the country. And so I think there was a push to raise the federal minimum wage that did not pass, but I don't think that's going away anytime soon. They're going to try to find a Christmas tree bill to hang that on at some point to see if they can get that passed. But we're going to continue pushing against that as well. But I will, Mark, look to see if I can track that info down.
Thank you. It's just a curiosity question. There's so much media about it, and I'd be shocked if there's much more than a couple percentage of employers nationwide that actually pay the federal minimum wage. Because
Mark, Luke Greiner has lots of information like that, and he's one person I've been thinking about having for our June meeting to really get the real story on, a lot of this information that we're hearing anecdotally around. So,
yep.
Yeah. Other questions for John? When do you anticipate, John, being able to move around more? When is the U.S. Chamber going to lighten up on there?
I think my best guess is it's probably going to be Labor Day. I think that's kind of what we've been told, and our bosses kind of said, well, we want to give you the summer to kind of one last, summer. And I would prefer to be on the road a little bit, if not a lot, only because, that's what I'm here to do. And I keep telling my boss, I feel like I'm stealing money because we're running out of things to do, right? My job is to be out there talking with chambers and members of Congress. And as the world is opening up around us, and Minnesota certainly is the last of my states to kind of open up, there's less appetite for having John join from his office in Eden Prairie versus being there in person. And so I'm hopeful sooner rather than later, but I suspect September, that kind of feels like a good safe date. But now with, the CDC changes in the mask, like the world just magically almost appeared to be open dramatically more so last Friday. So we'll see. But, talking about, as the congressman said, talking about fly-ins, I think I've got 5 or 6 fly-ins, chambers that have planned fly-ins for this fall. I'm going to DC. I can't travel for work, but I'm going to DC with my kids' 8th grade class here in a couple of weeks. So I'll get to see what's open, what's not. But the city is largely open now. Now Capitol Hill isn't. But the museums and monuments, a lot of that stuff is starting to open right now. And so I feel as DC starts to open, folks out there are going to realize that the rest of the world is far more open than they are. And so I'm hopeful that the fly-ins, and I'd encourage everyone, whether it's with the Minnesota Chamber, if you want to plan your own, everyone's itching to get back to Washington and kind of get back to the real world again. And so I'd encourage you to, whether again with Minnesota Chamber or your own, to plan that fly-in, get back out there. You can only right now have 5 people in the Capitol building or in the House offices, as the congressman said, but hopefully in the fall that's better. Or else, you know what, Tom Emmer can come to you guys. You can find a hotel ballroom or meeting room or whatever, and he'll come to you. So I want to encourage people to get back out there and get to Washington and start talking about business issues again, rather than let them hang out there by themselves without having to talk to anybody. We gotta take the fight to them again.
Teresa, I have a question for John.
Go ahead.
So John, when you talk about, where you're talking about the U.S. Chamber supporting the gas tax and other usage taxes to help fund some of the infrastructure priorities, is there any discussion about that usage tax being extended to electric vehicles and other types of vehicles, that aren't funded by gas, so that it's spread out across the board when we look at, a usage tax?
Yeah, absolutely. We're trying to figure that out because it's hard because the gas tax isn't perfect by any means. And because of more electric vehicles, alternative fuel vehicles that are not using gas. So there's some talk about, well, maybe there's a $100 or whatever it was, I think was the number I read, on electric vehicles when you purchase it or whatever, additional tax. Well, that number is really not enough to make a difference. But there's talk about, well, what if we got rid of the gas tax and we did vehicle miles traveled? That's probably a better way to do it. The problem is we haven't figured out how to do that yet, right? That's a great idea. But if you look at, I like to use the Real ID conversation. If you guys remember the whole Real ID debate that happened in the Minnesota Capitol that took about 6 years to get done. A lot of it was, there's a lot of tin hat people out there that it's a big privacy issue. So, that the government, knows all this information. So if you think people are going to want the government tracking how much you can drive your car or where you're going, even if they're not tracking where you're going, this is going to be a really difficult conversation to have. And different states are trying to pilot that for the vehicle miles traveled. I think Oregon was one state that was trying to pilot that. And and I think we need to figure out some of those lessons before we try to roll it out to the whole country, into the whole fleet of new vehicles and old vehicles, and how to do that. So I think there are a lot of interesting ideas out there, but a lot of them just haven't been tested and proven yet. And I think our needs for funding infrastructure are immediate. And I think some of those other ideas, and we're open to all of them, are maybe not quite far along enough in the process yet to make them workable. But if anybody has other ideas, we'd love to have them. And I hate to be the guy that's out there always saying maybe the gas tax is the best idea. Maybe it's not. But we determine it's a better idea than raising the corporate tax rate to 28%. Like, if there's other ideas, we'll take them. And I think there's a lot of great ideas incubating out there. They're just not ready to roll right now.
Anything else?
Was I that good?
I think you were.
Oh my gosh.
Either that or people are sleeping, John.
But I was that bad, maybe. That's probably what it was.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
John?
I think
Yes, sir.
How about raising the federal gas tax by, like 10 cents a year or something, some amount? I don't, I just picked 10 cents just because it's an easy number.
Yeah,
10 cents a year for X number of years until it reaches an appropriate sum. Because that
yeah, we're
it's a
open
lot
to
easier
whatever
than
it is.
trying to track how many miles we're all driving. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we came I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago, we came up with the idea as a way to kind of like, again, start the conversation about infrastructure. Because the problem we run into is everyone's like, absolutely, we have to do it. And then no one can agree how to pay for it. So we came out a couple years ago and said, well, let's raise it 5 cents a year for 5 years for a total of 25 cents, which would equate to 1 cent a year for the 25 years we haven't raised the gas tax, right? So it's a lot in the short term, but it's kind of working back. The problem we have is, the word tax, and I understand this because I just got done railing against taxes for 15 minutes, but the word tax is a 4-letter word to a lot of Republicans. I get that. Democrats don't like it. Now, all of a sudden, the Biden administration doesn't like it because it kind of breaks his pledge to say, well, I'm not going to tax anyone with an income under $400,000 or whatever the magic number was. A gas tax hits everybody, right? It hits everybody equally. And so then all of a sudden now Democrats who love all these corporate taxes don't like the gas tax. So then now we're kind of in a position where, we're in the middle where we want to be in the middle, but we don't have anybody with us. And so we've had that conversation. We continue to have that conversation, but all of a sudden, we don't have any dance partners right now. And if we can't figure this out here by the 4th of July or the end of summer, I think we're going to go another year without having anything done on infrastructure. And if it's not the gas tax, that's fine. Let's find another way to do it. But let's have the conversation about what the alternative to the gas tax is, rather than the conversation being, let's raise the corporate tax rate to 28% and fund roads and bridges and Green New Deal and green cars and, free college and all this other stuff with it. So if there's any great ideas out there, send them my way. I'll take credit for them and send them to my boss.
I guess I have a quick question, and it's kind of somewhat controversial, I guess, but you see the states going the way of legalizing recreational marijuana, that kind of stuff. It seems inevitable that at a federal level that's going to happen, and I would assume that taxing that would fund many of projects at the federal level, including Social Security and other stuff like that. So I would have thought that that our president, the current president, would have made that a more of an effort during this 4 years, but I guess we'll see. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but it seems like the states are doing it regardless.
It's what's interesting, and there's not a whole lot of movement on the federal level just because they don't think it can get done, but there are conversations. More of the conversations on the federal level is banks and lenders are having a hard time lending money to these because it's
Right.
still against federal law. So there's kind of this weird, can I loan money to these marijuana companies because it's in Colorado or South Dakota, where, so that's kind of where some of the federal conversation's happening. But what's interesting is that's kind of, in a lot of ways, how they're selling it in a lot of these states is by saying, we can tax it and make a lot of money on it. And what's interesting is that some of the states have gone so far and raised the taxes so much on this that now all of a sudden the illegal pot growers are coming back because they've taxed it so much that, I can grow it in my backyard cheaper than this guy's growing it when it's taxed, so there's this kind of weird dynamic. And I'm by no means a pot genius on any of this, but it is becoming a source of revenue for a lot of these states. And it kind of gets to that conversation, more sin taxes. We talk about not wanting to tax people that make less than $400,000, whether it's the gas tax or whatever it is, but, we're going to make cigarettes $10 a pack or whatever. We're trying to tax things, certain things we're trying to tax out like tobacco, and then there's certain things that are coming in like marijuana where we're trying to tax and be like, it's a great new source of revenue. So it's an interesting conversation, Chris, and it's not really much happening at the federal level, but we're seeing that at the state level. That's how a lot of states are selling it to people as a good idea. It's like, well, it's a good idea from a medical standpoint or fair use or whatever it might be, but then look at all this free money we get that we didn't get before.
Right. Well, and if it's done at the federal level and it's for all the states, then it also makes those businesses that are in that line of business be able to work in a safe environment, because right now they're sitting like banks on millions of cash. So they can't put their money anywhere because they're afraid it'll get seized. So
and it might be one of those things that the federal government eventually has to come in to regulate, only because if you look at internet sales tax or whatever, right? A lot of businesses were like, I don't want, everyone was against the internet sales tax until all of a sudden the state started passing it. And then a lot of these big companies were like, we need one federal policy because we don't want to have to navigate 50 different federal policies. And when you get into maybe some of this marijuana stuff, it might be a similar conversation from businesses, because the big opposition from businesses is, how do we make sure our employees are not under the influence while they're on the job, running a forklift, whatever that might be.
Right.
That's an issue that has yet to, be fully flushed out. And so every state's doing it differently. And at some point, are there going to be 50 different legalized marijuana policies, particularly as it relates to businesses and all these businesses that are doing work across state borders? Is there going to be a need for some sort of broad federal oversight, one rule for everybody versus 50 different ones? And so that might be the opening eventually for the federal government to get involved, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of movement there yet. They've got a lot of other crazy ideas they're trying to get through before they do that one. We ending on pot? Is that it?
All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, we are going to wrap it up. I want to thank John for joining us and giving us an update from DC. And hopefully, John, we'll see you there with the Minnesota Chamber. And I think they're coming in October, aren't they? Is that the date, October?
Yep, October. They're doing a virtual fly-in in early to mid-June, and then they're doing their big DC trip in October.
Okay, so we'll probably jump onto that virtual fly-in like we did the last time. It was pretty good.
Yeah.
And I just want to remind people again, we will be in person in June. We'll give you more information about that as it comes up. That's June 16th. We have moved our government affairs meetings to the third Wednesday of the month from 7:30 to 9. And we'll be back in then. Also, May 26th, our legislative wrap-up. Make sure that's on your calendar too. You register on the website, and then you'll get the Zoom link to that after you register at 7:30 to 9 on the 26th, the week from today. That is a week from today, right? Make sure, because I'm getting messed up. Yep, nope, a week from tomorrow. Excuse me, a week from tomorrow, the 26th. Bernie, you have any final parting comments?
Of wisdom, right? Looking for wisdom after all that. I just want to say thank you again. Thank you for taking the time this morning to be with us. It's a beautiful day in Minnesota. We've had some beautiful Minnesota days. Go out and eat and drink in your local establishments, especially those open bars or those open patios. It's beautiful. It's what Minnesota really loves to do, and support your local bars and restaurants, right, Ray? So again, thank you guys. And as far as John, the October fly-in to DC, you might have to help me twist Teresa's pinky to come with, because we all know Teresa's retiring August 31st. And I have difficult time telling her she needs to do one more DC trip with us before she says goodbye to her DC junkies and government affairs junkies that she has really developed over the years of us. This room used to be maybe 3 people, but because Teresa and Government Affairs, the group's up to 50 when we're all together. So John helped me talk her to coming back in to DC in October.
I will assure that she'll be there. She couldn't pass it up. We're too much fun.
That's right. And Teresa, you're going to have to help me here, but I want to acknowledge Teresa because Teresa won an excellent big award last week with the correct me, Teresa, with the Minnesota Chamber of
It's
Commerce.
the Mid-America Chamber Executives, Mid-America. It's a
And she was
5
Executive of the Year. Correct, Teresa?
Executive of the Year. That's me.
Yeah. So those aren't easy things to get. It takes 22, 23 years for Teresa, but we should be damn proud that our president won that, and she leaves on such a high note. I tell her she's like a ball player. She's going out on a high note so she doesn't go out on a slump. And we'll miss her, but again, I just wanted to call that out because she's been very humble, not sharing that a lot with people, and that's a big award. So thank you.
I'm still around in June. Don't push me out the door too fast there, Bernie. I would tell people too that we are in final interviews. The board will interview the 2 final candidates for the president's job on Tuesday at our board meeting, the 25th. I hear they'll be taking a straw vote at that point for who they would support as chamber president, and I would guess that an announcement will follow soon after that. So, and then depending on what kind of transition plan the new president wants to embark on will determine how much I'm around after that and how much I'm more behind the scenes. But I will be working until the August 31st. So thank you all for your time today. And thank you again, John, for being with us. And we'll see you on June 16th in person.
Every week, guys, a weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nice cup, Teresa.
Nice what?
Nice
Cup.
cup.
You know what? This is I love this. I take it everywhere. I'm never far from it. And I try to go like this whenever I'm drinking it. So
That's a great color too.
I know this is the new color.
Cody.
They have unlogoed ones in this color. So they're nice.
Yeah. Yep. They
I just found out
no
it's
one can steal it.
completely
It's got your name on it.
it's completely dishwasher safe. And this little, this little magnetic thing pops right off. It all goes in the dishwasher. It's great. I was washing it by hand and then I looked on the bottom, it says dishwasher safe on it.
Good to go.
Chris,
Yeah.
I just want to know why you gave me the bigger one, then Teresa got the smaller one. Are you trying to tell me something?
My dad made me do it.
There's bigger ones.
I'm gonna pawn it off on him.
There's bigger ones in this.
Yeah.
With a handle. It's
Oh,
great
man.
for beer. It'll take you through about 6 holes of golf with a vodka tonic.
Correct. If you want
Then you
one,
roll
Teresa,
on
you just
fire.
let me know.
Then you roll off.
It'll be a parting retirement gift.
Have a good day, everybody.
Yep. Have a good
Bye.
day.
See you, Tanya.
Bye. Bye, Ray.
Bye,
Ray,
Ray.
are you available right now? Can I call you quick? Are you
Yeah.
available?
Sure.
What's your cell phone? What's your cell phone?
260
See you, Chris. Thank you for attending. Bye,
7419.
Karen.
Great. Thank
Bye,
you.
Laura.
Bye, Chris.
See you
It was
guys.
good to see you this morning.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye-bye. I'll call you right now, Ray. I'm going to go to the restroom and I'll call you. Okay.
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 Thank you.
Thanks.
Yep.
See you
Bernie?
guys.
Bye, Bernie.
Yeah.
Jason did tell me he wants to